service chiefs, did it come as a surprise to you, seeing as there had been a lot of outcry for those service chiefs to be retired because of the situation, the insecurity situation in the country?
Well, I'm surprised that, of course, that it took so long, in the sense that the outcry, as you said, has been enormous. And if the public don't have any further faith in their security, the heads of security agencies, I think the government has a responsibility to sit down and take note. Either to tell the public, you're wrong. We are the experts. We know their functions. We know if they're fulfilling their functions, and we assure you that you are misreading the situation and that they're very competent. Reassure the public. It's not so much a question of changing people at the top as changing policy and strategy. If you have different people coming in, operating what is not functioned properly before, was not effective, then what's the point of the change? So I have not been part of the, shall we say, the excitation over changing one way or the other. I would just like to see the work done, to see people being able to live securely, being able to go to their farms securely, because we're all affected if things reach a stage where the food supply chain is broken. I've seen it happen in some countries before, not necessarily through violence, but simply because of economic decay, and it's not very pleasant. The nation faces hunger, starvation, and it comes very slowly, very slowly. So the change in security, service chiefs, and so on and so forth, well, I hope it's for the better, but the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating.
Okay, so what are your expectations? What would be that thing that you would see that would get you kind of excited to say that, yes, there's a new sheriff in town, there are new sheriffs in town, and they're actually hitting the ground running, they're getting the job done, and we are starting to see some changes?
Basically, attitude involving the people, accepting the fact that this is a people's war on unusual situation. It's a people's war, a people divided against themselves, but of course with identifiable enemies. And because the enemy is so deeply embedded in society, which is the major, which is the real stakeholder, then with this kind of war, you have to involve people. You have to involve people in the sense of information, involve them in accepting that they are part and parcel of what is going on, part and parcel of the solution. The soldiers, by the way, let me use this opportunity to say that I, for one, I really empathize deeply with the work of the military. I deeply empathize because I understand exactly the kind of enemy you're facing.
What kind of enemy is that?
A kind of enemy, faceless very often, ruthless, totally, never heard of Geneva Convention and would despise it, even if you try to bring it up to them, have absolutely no regard for humanity. Many of them believe that rewards are in afterlife anyway, and that if they're killed, it's a good thing for them. So it's a very strange breed we're confronting. But that's not the only, shall we say, variety. We have an enemy which believes in impunity. It believes that they're immune, that nothing can happen to them. And that is why, in my own state, you have soldiers taking the side of the enemy, actually escorting killers, rapists, marauders, and then beating up, flogging, and brutalizing victims. So victims twice over. Now, that wouldn't be happening if the people have really been made conscious of the nature of the enemy and have been permitted, have been encouraged to mobilize on their own behalf and collaborate with the structured security areas. I pay tribute just now to the military. I belong to a foundation which was set up to take care of military dependents, the widowed, the orphans, and so on of the military, as a gesture as a gesture. I joined this, I'm part of it, simply because I believe that we've got to erase a lot of the barrier between formal security and civilian security. We've got to make the soldiers understand that we see them also as human beings and that we know what they're facing. And they've got to accept the ethos of never betraying their charge. And that means that we also must recognize the fact that they're human beings, they have dependents, and they're fighting a most brutal war. So there is no real synergy at the moment between the security arms and the civilian basis of existence. And this has got to be bridged. That way, there's reduction in what I call internal treachery. What we're living right now is just survival under treachery. Treachery from the security forces, leading to movements like NSARS. Whereas, if we recognize not just the existence, but the nature of the common enemy, we wouldn't have this brutal confrontation between security and civilians. So when you talk about change of service chiefs, I'm going beyond the physical warfare. I'm talking about psychological warfare also, and a state of mind, one which enables even civilians to understand that sometimes they don't have to wait for the formal security to look after their own survival.
Okay, it's good you talked about a little bit about what's happening in your home state, in Ogun State, because the issue of the crisis with the herdsmen and farmers clashes is something that you've been vocal about, talking about it far back as 2018, when then the crisis seemed to have been, more prominent in the Middle Belt, in Benue State. But today we're talking about the Southwest spread to Oyo State, Ondo State, with what we are seeing today. What's your take on that? How did we get to where we are today?
I've been screaming, quietly if you like, but also from time to time screaming out loud. But I've been screaming a lot more quietly than even loudly, than many people know. I've used occasion, let me use this occasion like this, of even mentioning the fact that I sought and obtained sessions with the security chief, the late Azazi, for instance, who I met when I observed the deep penetration into society of enemy forces, of real subversive killer forces. You know, I live partly in the forest. I'm a forester. I'm at home there. And not just that, I go into the forest with my fellow hunters. We go through villages. We have seen depredations. We've seen just ordinary citizens, including even former military officers who've taken to farming, who've entered into farming, many of them go into farming. And we've seen how their farms have been just rubbished and degraded by these herdsmen. And of course, we have the notorious instance of a former civil chief, top civil servant, Olufalaye, kidnapped. His farms had been threatened long before then. And all this we saw coming, and we have been impressing it, not just in the security, but on our governors. But look, these people are coming closer and closer and closer. We shouted when it was Benue, we shouted when it was Plateau, etc., etc. So it isn't a question of waiting until they're right on our doorstep. And now it's on our doorstep. In my desperation, I took to wearing a Motekno outfit as a call, a reminder, so that each time I appear in public, I prick the conscience of our governors, saying that you promised this. And even that promise was as a result of various encounters, including formal meetings with governors, representatives, etc., of governments. I can tell, I wasn't surprised at all that Ondo finally took the plunge, and acted in a very proactive way. Ondo has been at the receiving end of this thing for a long time. I've gone to lecture at the University of the Elizade, I don't know which how it's pronounced because it's two names. So I've gone to lecture there, spoken to students there, my colleagues there. In fact, during one of my lectures, I said, look at your beautiful landscaped environment. I said, I hope you people know that the cows can come anytime and eat up all your beautiful flowers, and that you are simultaneous as you're planting and grooming your landscape, you are also organizing yourselves to repel the marauders, the Philistines, who understand that any kind of foliage, any kind of flora is food for cows. Actually said that, a public lecture. This is over a decade ago. And I spoke to lecturers who've been menaced physically. Cows, all the families are saying, we've owned the fair. Now, it's just upon us. A year ago, I spoke about nature manufacturing in Shah. 2 million of teak, which it planted. He's a furniture maker and an eco-minded person. So as he cuts, he plants. And he had these seedlings, over 2 million. His plantation is recognized by international bodies who visited, who encouraged him, and so on. And cows come along one day and eat up 2 million seedlings. Now, if that's not a declaration of war, what exactly is? Do we wait until people are raped, which has been going on casually? So what do they expect of us now that this war is on our doorstep? Of course, there has got to be civil mobilization. And if we keep waiting for this to be centrally handled, we're all going to become, if we're not already, slaves in our own land. That for me is personally intolerable. It's not an acceptable condition. And whatever it takes, I stand ready to contribute in any way. And I've made my government understand this, that we are here not just to live, but to live in dignity. Right now, our dignity is being rubbished. When what is happening, I'm sure that when you do your program, you will look at just today's paper. I don't want to hold it up myself. You do that. Headlines all over the place. The wailing of people, citizens. This happening in Ogun State. My forest has been taken over. It's been shrinking. My hunting grounds, yes, it's been shrinking. My family tells me that if I go in depth again, they will have me institutionalized.
When was the last time you went to your farms?
I still do some peripheral hunting, but the axis, the real hunting axis where we normally go, either individual or in group, what I call the Lafenwa, Lanlati, Iseyin, Okeiho, Okeogun. This is where the major war is going on right now. We haven't been able to go deep into that forest for months.
Have you had any sort of encounter with these people?
Oh yes, we have.
Can you tell us about that?
We have. Well, let's put it this way. When you're in the forest, you sort of grow extra layer of hair on your skin, and you learn when there is danger. And we've managed to, we stopped penetrating deeply unless in group. And this particular one, which comes to my mind, it was a good thing we were in a group. The menace was so evident, and the intentions were so, let's just say arguable, that we had to take defensive action. And I think when they saw that we were, even though we were hunting animals, we were also ready to defend ourselves, the attitude changed. But long before that, I'd been encountering groups, I'd been noticing the change in the character of these herdsmen whom we were meeting in the forest, which is what led me to insist on this meeting with the National Security Advisor. And at the beginning, as I've said again and again, we thought at the very beginning these were Boko Haram cells. And I asked Azazi, I said, do you realize that our forests have been taken over by Boko Haram cells? And he said to me, yes, said this is one of the reasons, if I were met in London on his way back from the States. And he said he'd just been to the States to negotiate or to at least discuss the possibility of acquiring spotter planes and helicopters to patrol some of these paths. Because at the time I thought they were so, the penetration was so much, I didn't even want to talk to him here. That's how bad it was. And the character was such. And we spoke to some governors individually, and they themselves had noticed it. Some of them, Ondo especially, had given instruction to the farmers that they must never lease any more farmland to outsiders to non-Ondo State people, without the authority of the minister, the commissioner for land affairs. So this thing has been with us, and it's just painful that those who could take action have been so lackadaisical that these people are now breathing on our necks.